cool. A Star Trek convention.
Melvar, can you give us some idea of how long this is going to last?
Until time stops.
You can't do this.
Now, we have a full schedule of events.
Can people who hate Star Trek leave?
Good question.
No, you have to stay even longer.
No.
Okay, hello. Welcome back to Classic Comics and another Trek Talk live stream where I'll discuss one of the episodes of the original Star Trek series about the episode and the behind-the-scenes making of it. And this week I'm going to be taking a look at I, Mud. Definitely a fun episode. This was episode 41 in broadcast order. And as always, I'll be reading from Mark Cushman's book. These are the voyages for behind-the-scenes information on the episode. So first, as always, please do like the stream and do sub to the channel while you're here. Okay, let's go ahead and get into this one. Written by Stephen Kandel, although several people wound up contributing to it, and directed by Mark Daniels. This is from NBC's press release on October 13th, 1967. The Enterprise crew finds itself at the mercy of an Earthling who rules a colony of female androids in I, Mud on NBC Television's Star Trek on Friday, November 3rd. Roger C. Carmel guest stars as Harry Mudd, reprising the character he portrayed in Mudd's Women, one of last season's Star Trek episodes. Mudd has created several hundred sets of girl androids, each set bearing the same name and looks. He becomes bored and wants to leave, but the androids have undertaken the project of studying humans and refuse his request. Mudd offers them a starship captain in exchange for himself and orders his chief coordinator, Norman, guest star Richard Tatro, to bring the Enterprise crew to him. Captain Kirk then sets out to find a flaw in the pattern behavior of the androids. Rhea and Alice Andries co-star as the twin android Alice androids. Kay Elliott is featured as Mudd's wife, Stella. The message of I, Mud, which takes second to the comedy antics, is that humans will stagnate and die without the necessary struggles to strive forward. And one other thing, all people have a little madness in them. This is Star Trek's campiest episode. It is also the first all-out comedy. Is I, Mud any good? The answer depends on one's tastes. Most fans love it. Yeah, this was their first one that really went full out into being comedic. There were a couple that, that had funny moments, particularly, I believe it was Tomorrow Is Yesterday from the first season, where they go back in time, and they wind up bringing the Air Force pilot on board. That's got some funny, humorous bits in it. But this is the one that's really, I think, could be categorized as a humorous episode. And that's in part because of the writer, David Gerrold, who I will talk about here shortly. The teaser, the longest and most action-packed of any in the series, starts the episode off with a bang. Act 1 remains nearly as intriguing. Then we are led to the throne room and the return of Harry Mudd. After this, the episode makes an abrupt turn, and it is hard to take anything seriously. Regardless, there are interesting twists in the story and wit in the writing, directing, and acting. I, Mud, in theme and with the set design of the underground chambers, is reminiscent of What Little Girls Are Made Of. Roddenberry even snuck in the idea about a human male being pleasured by a female android. The naughtiness is less subtle here. Much had changed between 1966 and 67 regarding what could be said or suggested on primetime TV. One example is when Chekhov is in the company of two alluring Alice models. Alice 322 asks, "You desire something, Lord?" Chekhov eyes them and says, "You're Alice?" One says, "I am Alice 118. The other says, "I am Alice 322. And Chekhov says, "Oh, well, it doesn't make much difference. You're both lovely. What a shame you're not real." Both answer in unison, "We are, Lord. We are programmed to function as human females." Another replay taking place here is this is the third time that Kirk talks a computer into a logical loop that causes it to shut down. In the past, logic was the weapon. This time, though, it is illogic. Those two slight comparisons aside, the episode is like no other. In 1967, with all its wannabe doublemint twins and trick shots to duplicate the duplicates even further, iMud was a marvel. Today, it is just a curious delight. Okay. Let's go ahead and get into this one here. All right, so this episode starts with McCoy and Spock just strolling down a corridor, and then they are greeted by a crewman, Mr. Norman here in his blue crew shirt. And McCoy observes that there is something off with that guy, Mr. Norman, that doesn't sit well with him. Spock asks for specifics, and McCoy complains that he never smiles and never makes any attempts at small talk, and his conversation never strays far from the particulars of his duties. Of course, he then realizes he's basically describing Spock, and then has to explain to Spock, well, I mean, that's fine for a Vulcan, but for a human, it's different. As McCoy says, the ears make all the difference. Now, meanwhile, Norman enters the auxiliary control room, although this auxiliary control room looks different than the one we've seen before. It's been shown a couple of times. It was shown in Doomsday Machine. I think that was the first time. And then there's at least one other episode where they have the auxiliary control room before this. But the set was... the Changeling. That was it, the Changeling, I think. But it does, the set actually is dressed differently here. So he easily dispatches the crewman who is working there. He really just kind of taps him on the shoulder with a karate chop, and he just sort of collapses. Then he starts making adjustments to the computers. Now, up on the bridge, Sulu tells Kirk that a new unauthorized flight plan has been fed into the computer, causing the Enterprise to change course, and he can't prevent it because manual control has been overridden. Kirk contacts the I can't talk today. Auxiliary control room, but no one answers, and Kirk sends security to investigate. Now, security arrives and finds the crewman there unconscious. A couple of the red shirts take him to sick bay while this other crewman stays behind. He informs Kirk that the controls have been locked and he can't override them. So then Kirk contacts what was it? What was it called? Emergency manual control. Yeah, he contacts the emergency manual control station or something like that to override the computer override. But that doesn't work because Norman has already been there and has incapacitated the crewman in that area as well. Norman then goes down to engineering and begins beating the crap out of Scotty and the other crewmen, and then makes more adjustments to the ship's systems before leaving. Now, Sulu then reports that their speed is increasing. It goes from about warp 3 or 4 up to warp 8, which is their maximum speed. Kirk calls engineering, but he's not getting any answers. So then he starts to head to engineering, but as he's approaching the turbo lift, Norman exits and grabs Kirk and tells him that basically tells him not to try and stop the ship. He tells Kirk that he is now in control of the ship and that the antimatter pods have been linked to the navigational relays, and any attempt to alter the ship's course will result in the destruction of the Enterprise. Spock checks and he confirms this. Norman assures Kirk that we mean you no harm, but we require your ship. Kirk asks who we are, and then Norman reveals that he is an android. And Kirk asks who is responsible for this. And again, this is directed by Mark Daniels. And Norman simply responds, I am not programmed to respond in that area, and shuts himself off. The Enterprise then takes the crew to an uncharted world after about 4 days of travel. Now, when they arrive, Norman reactivates, and he informs Kirk that he, Spock, McCoy, Uhura, and Chekhov are to beam down to the planet. Why those people specifically isn't given. I mean, presumably you would want maybe the ship's captain and first officer, but why the other people? I don't know. There's no real specific reason given. It's just plot convenience, I guess. Kirk initially refuses, but Norman tells him that the ship will remain locked in orbit forever until they comply. So they reluctantly beam down. The planet, we are told, is a K-type planet, meaning that people living on this planet have to be underground in underground facilities or living in domes because the atmosphere is poisonous, I believe. So they beam into an underground facility. And when they beam down, they are greeted by a pair of what appear to be identical twins. And they take a landing party through a large door into another chamber where they meet their abductor, none other than Harcourt Fenton Mudd, who is flanked by 2 more women identical to the first pair of twins. Kirk is incredulous at this and demands Mudd return control of the Enterprise. He then tries to call the ship, but one of the women takes his communicator and easily crushes it. So obviously she is an android as well. And of course, all the women are. Kirk demands that Mudd relinquish control of the Enterprise, but Mudd informs Kirk that he does the telling on this planet, and he tells the crew to get comfortable since they are going to be there for probably the rest of their lives. Mudd then comments on the beauty of his servants, noting that he has 500 of them attending his every need, and several more enter the chamber. Now, Kirk asks Mudd how he came to be here, and Mudd tells them that he was selling plans for certain technological items on backwater planets. It turns out that he had stolen some of these plans, and when he tried selling them to the Denebians, he was found out and arrested. He was facing the death penalty and fled, but his ship's navigational instruments were damaged, and he wandered in space for a while before finally winding up on this planet. He found the planet to be uninhabited except for 200,000 androids who offered to serve his every need. Spock asks what the problem is, and Mudd says that the androids will do whatever he asks of them, except allow him to leave. They won't let him leave. So he made a bargain with them. He said, if you'll let me leave, I'll trade you other humans for me. I'll help you bring some other humans here, then you can keep them and let me go. So he had the Enterprise brought to them so that they'll have more humans to serve and study. In exchange, Mudd will leave. Now, Kirk refuses, but Mudd makes it clear that this isn't really a request. He then tells the androids to send the crew to their quarters. As they leave, McCoy passes an alcove and he asks what it's for. And Mudd reveals that he had an android of his wife, Stella, created. Apparently, Mudd enjoys amusing himself by activating the android, and when it begins to scold him, he shuts it down by loudly telling it to shut up, Stella. So then they go to their quarters. And when they get there, Kirk asks Norman who created the androids originally. Norman tells them that they were created by another race in the Andromeda galaxy, but their sun eventually went nova and the race was wiped out except for a small number who eventually made their way to this planet and settled here. But then they eventually died out as well. And that left the androids with no one to serve. So they were pleased when Harry Mudd arrived because they are programmed to serve others, and without anyone to serve, they are without purpose. Now, once they're alone, Spock observes that this many androids can't be operating independently, and there must be some sort of central hub which directs their actions. So Kirk orders Spock to find the central hub and the others to observe as much as they can, while Kirk tries to deal with Harry Mudd. Later, Spock enters a chamber and he finds Norman. Norman now wearing a medallion on his neck with the number 1 on it, operating a console. Spock asks what it is, and Norman says that it is a central operating system. Spock notes that it is rather simple in design and asks if all the androids are controlled by this device. Then Norman's medallion begins to flash and beep several times, and then Norman simply responds, "I am not programmed to respond in that area." Meanwhile, Mudd shows some other androids to Kirk and Uhura. And Uhura asks how long their android bodies last. And one of the Alices responds that their bodies are made and can last up to 500,000 years. She also notes that they can put a human brain into an android body. And Mudd notes that Uhura could have virtual immortality and eternal beauty if she wants to do that. Now, later, Kirk and Spock are discussing Norman when one of the Alice androids arrives with Scotty in tow. Now, Kirk asks Scotty what he's doing on the planet since he told the crew that no one was to beam down, until they were ordered to. And then Mudd reveals that he already beamed several androids up to the Enterprise, and they have been bringing Kirk's crew down to the planet for several hours. And now most of them are on the planet, and Mudd's androids are in complete control of the Enterprise. Kirk is furious when he hears this, and he warns Mudd that Starfleet will stop him. But Spock tells Kirk that Mudd might be able to just pull this off, and Kirk says that there are many issues, that their main issue is going to be trying to get the crew to return to the ship. After all, as Kirk says, what will the crew do when they realize they can have their every want and whim fulfilled on this planet? Now, a pair of Alices bring Chekhov some wine and ask if he wants anything else. He laments that they're not real, and they assure Chekhov that they are programmed to function as human females. So, fully functional, then I guess, programmed in a wide variety of techniques, all manner of love. How did Data say it? All manner of pleasuring or something like that. I don't know. Now, later, Kirk is getting frustrated because his crew is already being beguiled by everything the androids have to offer, and he reminds them that they won't be staying on this planet. Then an Alice enters the room and asks if they want anything. Kirk says they want to go back to the Enterprise. And Alice says that she is not programmed to respond in that area. She asks again if they want or have any, if there is anything they need. And Kirk says that they need the Enterprise because without it, they are unhappy. The Alice asks what unhappy means. And Spock says that humans become unhappy when their wants and needs are unfulfilled. Now, the Alice asks what unhappy means. I'm sorry. Kirk says they need the Enterprise, and the Alice's medallion starts to beep. And unfortunately, the photo has kind of cut it off. You can't see it here, but her medallion starts lighting up and beeping. She then says that the Enterprise isn't a want or need, but a mechanical device. Kirk responds that the Enterprise is a beautiful lady and they love her. The medallion beeps more, and then Alice says, illogical, illogical, all units relate, Norman coordinate. She then says that they must study this further, and then she leaves. Now, later, Mudd is preparing to leave the planet, and Kirk again asks Mudd to hand over the Enterprise, which he again refuses. But before leaving, Mudd can't resist activating Stella one last time. Again, she begins scolding him and yelling at him, and then he loudly tells Stella to shut up. He then tells the androids to gather his belongings and take them up to the ship. But the androids refuse. When Harry asks why, Norman reveals that after studying Harry, they have determined that humans are too greedy and destructive to be allowed free run of the galaxy. They plan to leave the Enterprise crew and Harry all on the planet. They will then take the Enterprise to the Federation and offer their services to humanity. Eventually, they will accept android control in return for having everything they want granted to them. Now, later, as they discuss their dilemma, well, come on. Here we go. Now, I guess I don't have a good screen capture of it. Oh well. Spock again observes that the device that Norman said was a central processing hub seems far too simplistic for that purpose. Let me take a drink of water right quick. Hold on. Okay. Later, as they discuss their dilemma, Spock again observes that the device that Norman said was a central processing hub is too simplistic for that purpose. He also observes that there are a multitude of Alices, Maisies, Barbaras, Daisies, and other androids, but there is only one Norman. And he speculates that Norman himself is really the central hub that directs all the other androids. They decide to try confusing and overwhelming Norman's programming by exhibiting wild, irrational behavior. To this point, they sedate Harry, and then they tell the androids that Harry is ill and he is dying. Kirk takes one of the Alices to see Harry, and McCoy tells the android that Mudd is dying. She tells them that they will be allowed back on the Enterprise to treat him, so he won't die. But then Uhura tells the android that it's all a trick and they're just trying to get back on the ship so they can sabotage the Enterprise or escape. Kirk asks Uhura why she betrayed them, and Uhura says that she wants an android body and wants immortality. The Alice android then tells them that their request is denied and she leaves. Kirk then thanks Uhura for her performance because it was all a ruse, of course. Scotty observes that they were expecting the crew to make some sort of escape attempt, and now that they've done it, the androids won't be expecting another, which, I don't know, that seems like quite an assumption to make. Why would you assume they won't expect another? I mean, if you try to escape and fail, it seems reasonable to assume you'll keep trying, but that's what he says. So, bit of a lack of logic in the plot there, I think. Now, later, Kirk summons a pair of Alices and tells them to watch as the rest of the crew performs. McCoy and Scotty pretend to play instruments while Chekhov and Uhura dance. When the androids ask why, Kirk says that they are celebrating their captivity. After they stop dancing, Uhura slaps Chekhov, and as they observe this irrational behavior, the Alices, their medallions, again start beeping, again indicating that they're communicating with Norman and trying to understand what's going on. Kirk then tells them to stand completely still, but then Chekhov starts dancing again. This causes the Alices to freeze up as they communicate with Norman regarding what is happening. Meanwhile, Spock is interacting with two other Alices and tells one of them that he loves her, but that he hates the other one. The Alices ask why, since they are identical in every way, and Spock says that yes, that is why he hates her, because she is identical to the other. Again, this seeming contradiction causes them to communicate with Norman as their medallions begin flashing, and eventually they shut down. With several androids now caught up in logic loops, they suspect that Norman will be overwhelmed with all the conflicting messages, and they plan to overwhelm him and shut him down as well, thus causing all the androids to shut down, hopefully. So they confront Norman, and Harry gives a grandiose speech about the human need for freedom and that captivity is inherently harmful to humans. Then McCoy and Scotty tell Norman that humans only want to perform labor and they enjoy suffering, and that they can only be happy by us being kept in captivity and kept as slaves. So a pair of Alices start blinking again, clearly confused, and Norman says that these things are illogical. and asks Spock to clarify them, but Spock simply responds with a lot of flowery, contradictory nonsense. Then Scotty declares that he's ready to die, and the others pretend to phaser him to death. McCoy says he's dead, and then Kirk says they must mourn Scotty's death, and then they all begin laughing. Norman insists that these things are illogical, and Kirk tells Spock that it's time to use the bomb. Spock then reaches under his shirt and pretends to pull out a bomb made of some sort of plastic explosive, I guess. He then pretends to throw it to Mudd, who pretends to catch it. Harry then pretends to hit it with a golf club, and the others pretend that an explosion has gone off. Again, this irrational behavior causes the Alices to shut down, as Norman insists that this can't be happening as there was no explosion. Harry then says that he lied, and then Kirk tells Norman that anything Mudd tells him is a lie. Then Harry tells Norman that he's lying, and Norman's medallion starts blinking as he tries to reconcile the contradiction. He even literally begins to emit smoke as he overheats, I guess, and asks Kirk to explain, but Kirk simply responds, "I am not programmed to respond in that area." And Norman shuts down. Later, Spock reports that the other androids are all immobilized, which seems odd because then in this sort of closing scene, there's several androids and they don't seem immobilized to me. So I don't know. I guess maybe they reprogram them afterwards or something. So then they tell Harry that he is not leaving with them. Instead, they're leaving him on the planet. Mudd is unhappy at first, but then he looks around at all these, of course, hot androids and laments that as prison sentences go, this isn't the worst. Then Kirk tells Harry that the androids are being reprogrammed to focus on developing the planet, not serving people, but that they have programmed a special android just for Harry to serve as his attendant. And Mudd thinks this is splendid news until Stella appears and starts scolding him again. Mudd tells her to shut up as he has before, but now it doesn't work. Then another Stella appears, and Mudd pleads with Kirk to take him with them, saying that leaving him behind would be inhuman. And then another Stella appears, and Mudd realizes that there are actually now hundreds of Stellas, all programmed to torment him. And of course, the crew gets a big laugh out of it, and the episode ends there. So this was a fun one, definitely. Grade, I'll give it. Yeah, well, I'll give it a B plus. Yeah, I think a B plus is good. Okay, so and again, Roger C. Carmel returned as Harry Mudd. Richard Tatro as Norman, Alice and Ray Andrees as the Alice androids. Alice Andrees as Alice 1 through 250, and Ray Andrees as Alice 251 through 500. Kay Elliott played Stella. Okay. There we go. All right, so let's talk about this one. Okay, so the premise for the new Harry Mudd story had actually been around in the Star Trek offices for a while. As part of his original proposal for Star Trek series proposal in 1964, so 3 years earlier, Roddenberry had included a story idea about a man against machine tale called Reason. His title referenced a short story by Isaac Asimov that also had the title Reason, first published in 1941. Asimov's story pitted robots with highly advanced reasoning abilities against the humans who created them. The robots decided that humans were too short-lived to be of much use. Roddenberry's Reason told how the USS Yorktown encounters a planet in the Isaac IV group, where all intelligent organic life has perished, leaving a perfectly functioning robot society. Roddenberry's robots, like Asimov's, acquired the ability to think and therefore think they could reason, and reason, reason that they could and should make decisions for themselves. In December of 1966, Roddenberry, brainstorming with Gene Kuhn, took the idea in a new direction, asking what would happen if Harry Mudd, on the loose again, came across this mechanical society. The two Genes settled on the title I, Mudd, which pays homage both to Isaac Asimov's 1950s science fiction anthology I, Robot, which included Reason, and the Robert Graves 1934 novel I, Claudius, where Claudius reluctantly becomes emperor of the Roman Empire, but wishes he could escape the role. Hold on a moment. Okay. Roger C. Carmel said, Mudd's Women was a pretty big success, and they got a lot of positive reaction from it. So they wrote one especially for me the next season. Scheduling the writing and production was tricky, though. Stephen Kandel, who had created the character of Harry Mudd, was now a staff writer and associate producer on ABC's new series Iron Horse, which he co-created with Star Trek veteran director James Goldstone. And Roger C. Carmel, the actor who had played Harcourt Fenton Mudd, had been cast in a sitcom Mothers-in-Law on NBC, which was produced by Desi Arnaz. A sequel to Mudd's Women was dependent on Kandel and Carmel's availability. Because of this, I, Mudd was put into development early and classified as a rush. Kandel turned in his outline on March 23rd of 1967. It barely resembled the I, Mudd we would come to know. In this version of the story, a strange mix of VIP passengers are traveling aboard the Enterprise. One is named Idris Vane, a woman so taken with her own looks that she was tempted to trade her mortal body for that of an android, an artificial body fashioned in her image and incapable of aging. Also on board is her traveling companion, Brother Mercy, a depraved preacher, and several robots, all identical in appearance, all named Norman. So the original story was quite different. As they had done with Idris and with the help of Brother Mercy, the robots attempt to entice the crew of the Enterprise into wanting to live as robots, live in a world of robots programmed for their pleasure. Meanwhile, the Enterprise journeys to the robot's place of origin, where Kirk has been ordered to investigate. And this would bring about the unexpected reunion with Harry Mudd, the mastermind behind all the mechanical scheming. Roddenberry, thrilled to receive the story only 3 days after assigning it and eager to get a jump on the script writing process, sent a letter to Kandel telling him, quote, delighted to get the outline last Friday and would like you to get into first draft immediately. Despite being delighted, Roddenberry included 3 pages of notes explaining to Kandel, quote, as the captain of a starship assigned patrol of an entire section of our galaxy, Kirk is a Captain Horatio Hornblower of the space age with enormous problems on his mind, involving the whole Earth Federation and its many colonies, its diplomatic problems with other races. Items of this size and Kirk's general demeanor, attitude, and personal dignity must believably reflect the enormity of his responsibilities and the personal disciplines he has to acquire. This made it clear that even with a potentially amusing episode, Roddenberry nonetheless expected his Star Trek to remain thought-provoking and primarily serious. And Kirk would always be carrying a great burden on his shoulders. In other words, he wanted I, Mudd to play like Mudd's Women. Later in the story, as crew members are duplicated as robots, we get 2 Kirks. Of this, Roddenberry wrote, we've done duplicates of Kirk twice during the first season and have agreed with NBC to hold back on this for a while. However, we've never done a duplicate of Spock. Does this offer any ideas to you? The thing is, an android duplicate of Spock would just would pretty much just be Spock, wouldn't it? It wouldn't be that different. Also problematic was that Harry Mudd's return was overshadowed by the other characters like Idris Vane, Brother Mercy, and the Normans. And Mudd's entrance comes late, more than halfway through the story. With these problems, Roddenberry had jumped the gun by telling Kandel to begin writing the script. Furthermore, NBC had not yet approved the original outline, and Gene Kuhn, who was on vacation, hadn't even read it yet. And there was another issue, and that was with Brother Mercy. So Brother Mercy was basically a satire or parody of a Bible thumping preacher. And Stephen Candell later said, quote, "It was guaranteed to offend almost everyone. I talked to Gene and we had a lot of fun with it. He loved the idea, but he said, we're going to have a nightmare with the network about this. And I said, yeah, that's the fun of it." 3 days after Justman voiced his concerns, NBC's Stan Robertson contacted Roddenberry. The network wanted Brother Mercy taken out completely. Now, like Justman, Robertson was bothered that there was too little Harry Mudd in this Harry Mudd story. Further, he was concerned that when the character finally made his entrance, no explanation was given as to what we should expect from him or how Kirk even knows him. This led to the banter between Kirk, Spock, and Mudd at the start of Act 2 in the filmed episode. It is a quick recap for the benefit of Mr. Chekhov, who was new to the ship and missed the previous encounter with Mudd. More so, it is a recap for the viewing audience, but this was one of the smaller changes made to the script. Gene Kuhn returned from his vacation on April 1st and found a memo from Roddenberry. It read, quote, "Stephen Candell has a problem of turning his stories constantly in the direction of being space pirate type fiction, with characters and stories which would work better on Lost in Space." The buck had officially been passed. Kuhn read the outline as well as the story notes from Roddenberry and the notes from Justman and from Stan Robertson, and then advised Candell to stop writing the script and revise the original outline instead. Candell, who at this point was busy rewriting episodes of Iron Horse, put his Star Trek assignment off, not delivering his revised story outline until April 20th. Brother Mercy was taken out, but Idris Vane remained. To Candell's thinking, she was a necessary part of the story. She was the one with the robots, and the robots were the reason the Enterprise is being sent on this mission of discovery. They serve as the bait. Now, what follows is, there's just a bunch of memos back and forth and a lot of rewriting of the script. Hey, Lord Thoth. Hail, sir. Good to see you. Thank you for stopping by. Always good to see you. I'm not going to go into all this because a lot of it's pretty tedious, just lots of memos back and forth, sometimes over fairly minor changes. I'll just kind of hit the highlights here. Okay, so DC Fontana, like Robert Justman, wanted to lose the character of Idris Vane and suggested utilizing one of our regular women to sell the point that a human might be tempted to trade a body that ages for a body that doesn't. She wrote, quote, I think it is more important for us to focus on our principles and Harry Mudd plus the androids. These people are our story, and Idris Vane is so much dead weight. We could always use Uhura in this scene. She might have a disinterested curiosity in the mechanical bodies, and the others might be holding such a possibility out to her in order to try to corrupt her. Let's not use Idris. So, of course, that is how it plays out in the episode, and as we see here, it was Fontana who made that possible. And you see that in several scripts where she's often the one who is sort of pushing characters like Uhura and Scotty and Chekhov to be more prominent. As for the other regulars, Fontana told Kuhn, I have a feeling throughout that Kirk does not do enough. Both he and Mudd come off very flat. Kirk should be moving, doing at least protesting more. Spock is not used to good enough advantage either. He is the computer expert. Essentially speaking, robots are computer based. Surely we can come up with some good suggestions and business and not be just standing around all the time. Let's see here. Okay, Imud had begun with Roddenberry, and now Roddenberry wanted to try finishing it, especially since Justman had pointed out all the potential possibilities for naughtiness in the script. His polish was the yellow cover first draft, dated July 21st. Among Roddenberry's changes, one humorous moment not included in the yet-to-come shooting script where an examination reveals Norman to be a machine. Scotty expresses an urge to take him apart and then quickly adds that it is nothing personal. Norman, of course, understands. The first two acts were fun, but the problem remained that Harry Mudd still didn't really even appear in the story till past the halfway point in the episode. Gene Coon was busy rewriting several other scripts. Dorothy Fontaine as well was doing other rewrites. After Roddenberry turned in his own rewrite, he left the office for a while to work on an assignment writing a teleplay for a Robin Hood TV movie that wound up not getting made. That was when Coon thought of David Gerrold. So I'll talk about David Gerrold here for a minute. David Gerrold, who was 23, was a fan of science fiction. He said, in those days, there wasn't a lot of science fiction. There were like maybe 90 science fiction writers in 1967, and there were maybe 300 to 500 science fiction books. So the really dedicated fan could have read every major sci-fi book. And I started when I was 9. By the time I was 20, I'd read pretty much everything published since 1930. Gerald had recently graduated from USC, where he studied film. He had just also sold his first script, which was for an educational film called A Positive Look at Negative Numbers. And that allowed him to land an agent. On September 18th of 1966, Gerald was watching the premiere of Star Trek. He remembered thinking, I looked at the Salt Vampire episode and I said, they're going to screw this up. That was my immediate reaction. Look, the guy with pointed ears, he has no emotion. There's no drama there. They've got to get rid of him. And they're going to just do Monster of the Week stuff, and they really need to do proper science fiction. So despite his criticisms, Gerald was impressed enough by Star Trek to try writing a story treatment. 3 days later, he finished an epic 60-page story called Tomorrow is Yesterday. And of course, this is just a coincidence. This is not the same episodes Tomorrow is Yesterday that wound up being made. That was written by DC Fontana, and that was a completely separate story. The similar title was just a wild coincidence. In Gerald's story, the Enterprise discovers a giant generation ship called the Voyager. Not Voyager 6, I assume, which is on a collision course with a populated planet. Voyager had been launched from Earth more than a century before. After a mutiny and the passage of so many years, the people on Voyager have come to believe their enclosed world is the totality of existence. As a result of the mutiny, the populace is now also divided into two warring camps. Kirk must reestablish amity between them, convince them that their world is really a ship and it's in danger, and then change the ship's course. This, of course, sounds a lot like the plot of For the World is Hollow and I've Touched the Sky. And it's likely that they probably borrowed some ideas from that script for that episode. Now, Gerald's agent submitted Tomorrow is Yesterday to Star Trek. On October 3rd, Gene Coon wrote back, quote, Mr. Gerald's outline was by no means inadequate. It is, a matter of fact, very adequate. Unquestioningly, our young man can write. He has a good imagination and a good sense of structure. Unfortunately, his ideas of what is possible in television are somewhat grandiose. This is a fault which is found in the majority of vastly more experienced writers, so don't think I'm picking on Mr. Gerald. I am not. I'm very impressed with him. Because I'm so impressed, I would be delighted to meet with him and tell him more of our specific needs. Gerald said either Gene Coon was an enormously generous man or very desperate. I just think he was an enormously generous man. He loved encouraging new talent. While a few more scripts were needed to finish up the first season, Coon was not about to gamble on an untested writer. Instead, he assigned himself 3 different episodes, which were Arena, Errand of Mercy, and Devil in the Dark, and gave out 4 additional writing assignments. Stephen Karabatzos got Operation Annihilate. Paul Schneider got an episode called Tomorrow the Universe, which wound up being scrapped and never made. Theodore Sturgeon got Amok Time, and Dorothy Fontana got Friday's Child. Only the 3 by Coon and Karabatzos' script assignment made it into the first season. 2 of the others were held over into the second season. Schneider's script was jettisoned altogether. Regardless, Kuhn spent time with Gerald, praising him for the quality of his story outline and educating him on the limitations of television production and the needs of a series such as Star Trek. Gerald remembered Kuhn telling him, quote, "We have a problem finding good stories because science fiction writers don't know scripts and script writers don't know science fiction. So if you can do both, let us see some stuff from you. Submit stuff for next season." The stage would be set for one of Star Trek's most popular episodes, which would be The Trouble with Tribbles, which is going to be the next episode that I'll look at, and was written by David Gerald. Okay. All right, so Gerald, fresh off his first writing assignment with Trouble with Tribbles, had made an impression on Kuhn. He had also saved Star Trek money because Gerald said, "They only paid me $3,000 for Tribbles, which was a bottom of the scale rate." Because a fledgling writer like David Gerald was not yet a member of the Writers Guild of America, he was not entitled to the full union rate of $4,500. Kuhn, however, felt Gerald had earned the right to receive the same pay as another writer on the show, including some writers who had performed far less impressively than Gerald. The question was how to get that extra $1,500 into Gerald's pocket without upsetting the Desilu bean counters. Gerald said, "Gene calls me into his office and hands me a script and says, what we want to do is get down to the planet by the end of the first act, not at the end of, not in the middle of Act 2, not at the end of 30 minutes, but in the first 15 minutes. Everyone knew the story didn't really kick into gear and get going until Kirk and company are reunited with Mudd, but no one had a solution to fix it. On that particular night, Gerald recalled, they had just rerun an episode, which was A Taste for Armageddon, where somebody flips open Kirk's communicator and imitates his voice and orders Scotty to beam the entire crew down. Scotty doesn't fall for it, though. So Gene Kuhn says to me, how are we going to get the entire crew down to the planet? Now, I didn't know they'd be fighting with this problem I didn't know they had been fighting with this problem for 2 weeks. I said, well, you can't have Norman, the android, imitate Kirk's voice because on the episode that was just telecast last night, Scotty didn't believe it. So Scotty's not going to be any dumber. These androids have already demonstrated in the teaser that they are much stronger than human beings, so they can just grab the crew and bring them down. And you don't really even have to show it. You just have one android walk in and report to Norman that they say they have just completed beaming down the crew. And this look comes over Gene Kuhn's face, and he said, you just solved in one line what we have been arguing with about for 2 weeks. I want you to do the rewrite on the script, have the whole crew down on the planet as fast as possible. Then we want to do all this illogical stuff. The illogical stuff was the crux of the episode's comedy, as Kirk and his crew create confusion in the androids by behaving erratically. Gerald's other contribution was the idea of expanding on Justman's suggestion to have several real-life twins appear as the androids, multiplied through various camera angles. And obviously, this is probably the best example right here. And also with editing room trickery. He later said, so we had 500 identical androids of beautiful girls. And Gene says, why did you do that? And I said, because I thought it would be funny. He goes, okay. Of course, it made for the gag with Stella at the end of the episode. Ah, yes, Stella. Stella, the unpleasant... Jesus, that face. Stella, the unpleasant android made in the likeness of the unpleasant wife that Mudd had abandoned, was already in the script, but it was Gerald's idea that the story should end, to the horror of Harry Mudd, with Stella having been duplicated hundreds of times over. Let me see. Yeah, there we go. While working on the rewrite, Gerald spent time on the Star Trek set, soaking up as much as he could about what was and was not possible in production. Quote, Mark Daniels was the generous type, said Gerald. He took time to explain things to me, and he was a legend. I mean, the guy basically invented the 3-camera sitcom. He did all the Lucys. It was a privilege to be in the same room with him. The thing is, I didn't know who Mark Daniels was the whole time I was working on Star Trek, except that he was this old-time director with a lot of credentials, and that everybody respected and loved him. And he was a great guy. And maybe a year or two after Trek, I'm watching an old Lucy episode, and the credits came on, and I saw Mark Daniels, and I thought, oh shit. It hadn't hit me. I mean, I knew the name, but I hadn't made the connection. Kuhn, who was pleased by Gerald's rewrite, designated it as the final draft and handed the script over to Dorothy Fontana for a bit of a polishing. Her rewrite, the revised final draft, came in on August 8th. She had taken Candel's writing, Roddenberry's writing, and Gerald's writing and blended them together into something that was now cohesive and felt like Star Trek, even though it was an atypical episode. Kuhn contributed page revisions of his own on August 7th and 8th, making it 5 writers who had their fingers in this episode. Filming would start 6 days later, and Joe DaGosta would have plenty of work finding himself some twins. Okay. Okay, so Mark Daniels returned for his 10th directing assignment. Oh, hey, Gwagnar. Good to see you, sir. Thank you for stopping by. And this was his first and only Star Trek comedy. It was already known that Roger C. Carmel would reprise the role of Harry Mudd. Yeah, there he is. Stephen Candell said, Roger C. Carmel was wonderful as Harry. He inhabited the character and expanded it. He developed the character physically as an actor. Working often in television since the 1950s, Carmel had become a prominent guest star in the last few years, thanks to standout roles on hit series such as I Spy, Batman, and The Man from U.N.C.L.E. And now he was busier than ever and unavailable throughout June, July, and early August, filming the first 16 episodes of The Mothers-in-Law, a sitcom. After that, the series went on a 2-month production hiatus. Therefore, I Mudd was slated to film between middle and late August, allowing time for pickup shots should any be needed. Richard Tatro, who was 28 at the time, and when you read the ages, it's surprising how young some of these actors were. Because, I mean, I look at Richard Tatro here, and how old would you think he is? I mean, I think late 30s, at least. And Roger C. Carmel, like I remember when I did the Mudd's Women episode, and I talked about that, I was surprised because when he did Mudd's Women, he was like 34 or 35. I mean, I would have sworn the guy was like pushing 50 or something, or at least in his 40s. And similarly, Tatro is 28 here when he did this, but he looks older. I don't know. I guess people just aged more quickly back then, or at least some people did. His performance is right on the mark, humorless, yet even as he commands the Enterprise, somehow non-confrontational. The unusual speech pattern of separating each word with the slightest pause contributed to making this a challenging performance, but added greatly to its success. Tatro had been in television and film since 1961, usually in small roles. He had been featured in 3 1966 episodes of Branded as Lieutenant Douglas Briggs and received fair supporting roles in mid-1960s B films such as and I'm going to name these films, and I swear these sound like it sounds like he was in a different film business, if you know what I mean. These 3 films were Sin in the Suburbs, Warm Nights and Hot Pleasures, and Pandora and Her Magic Box. A popular series like Star Trek should have represented a big upturn in Tatro's career, but this is actually his last known filmed performance of any consequence. So, I don't know. After this, he really didn't do much, apparently. I don't know. I haven't checked on IMDb. I guess I should have done that. Walter Koenig was given another good role, with George Takei no doubt envious. The producers believed Chekhov, with his youthful innocence, offered more comedic possibilities on Mudd's World than Sulu. Also, having Chekhov among those on the planet opened the door for Kirk to give us a quick recap about who Harry Mudd was. In the days before the internet, the most challenging aspect of the casting for this episode was trying to find people to play Mudd's androids. Joe DaGosta said, quote, "I remember trying to find out where to find twins. I called SAG and they were of no help. I did everything I knew how to do, with my resources being very limited, mainly because of my own lack of knowledge on how to seek out some of this stuff. I didn't even know that there were twin societies. And I just happened to be driving down Hollywood Boulevard one day, and I saw a couple of twins walking along the sidewalk. They were very good looking, very attractive, as I recall. And he says, even on the experienced side, if you know what I mean." So what does he mean? I mean, he kind of seems like he's maybe suggesting that they were prostitutes, maybe? I don't know. So I pulled my car over and said, "Excuse me, do you want to be on TV?" It sounded like a line, and it was made all the worse because I didn't even have a business card to give them. We didn't carry them back in those days. So I just wrote my number down, but they called. I wasn't searching. I just happened to be driving by, and there they were. I brought them in, and they read this, auditioned, and they were terrible. They had no experience, at least not at this sort of thing. Again, he's making he's making a rather oblique comment on them, like, think these women are, maybe pros. And Bob Justman objected to the hiring of them. And I said, "Bob, they're pretty. And also, Bob, they're twins." So he stopped objecting and they were hired. DaGosta could not recall if these twins were the ones cast as the Maisies or the Barbaras. Either way, they were seen but not heard. All the dialogue would instead be given to the Alice series. So they are not the ones, they're not the Alices. Now, I don't know. From what they say in here, I get the impression they maybe were the Barbaras. Where was that? Yeah, here we go. We see the Barbaras here. I guess I should have gotten a closer up look at them. But from what they kind of talk about, how they talk about it in the script, I think it's these two that they were talking about. Okay, now Alice and Ray Andrees would appear as the beautiful Alices. Let's go back to them. There you go. After the first 10 minutes of the episode, there's barely a shot where one of them or both are not seen or heard. Alice Andrees was given a screen credit as playing Alice 1 through 250, with Sister Ray playing Alice 251 through 500. This was not actually the case, but production records indicate when on camera together, Alice was always assigned a lower number than Ray. This was done so to help the crew, director, and cast know who they were talking to at any given time. Now, right before filming I'm Mudd in June 1967, the Andrees sisters had appeared in ads for Gun, which was a feature film based on the Peter Gunn TV series. They were not actually in the movie. They were just a tool for catching people's attention for the 30-second commercials. After this, they appeared in a 1968 episode of Batman, a 1969 episode of Bonanza, and a 1970 exploitation film called Hell's Bloody Devils. They were also singers and recorded 2 albums with their group, The Sound of Feeling. Tom and Ted Lagarde played the Herman series, so I believe that's them back here. These male twins you see a few times in the episode. Despite having some of their more prominent scenes left on the editing room floor and being kept mostly in the background, they were actually well-known entertainers in country music, having released several singles and albums beginning in the late 50s, along with frequent TV appearances. They even hosted their own TV series on local television in Los Angeles, the Lagarde Twins Show on KTLA Channel 5 from 1957 to 1958. Tamara and Star Wilson appeared as the Maisie series, while Maureen and Colleen Thornton appeared as the Barbara series. So I guess, like I say, I think they're the ones that were probably the twins that he had originally tried to cast. And then, of course, last but not least, Kay Elliott played Stella Mudd and all of her frightening duplicates. The face and voice that drove Harry Mudd into space. Now, get this. She was 38 when she did this. And again, I mean, I would not guess her to be 38. I would guess her to be probably in her 40s at least. She was right at the beginning of what would become a 13-year run on television, almost always playing very unflattering roles. Among these, she played Aunt Hagatha, the witch in a couple of episodes of Bewitched, and was featured alongside two other Star Trek guest players, Paul Carr of Where No Man Has Gone Before and John Crawford of the Galileo 7 in 1973's film The Severed Arm. And Joe DaGosta also cast Elliot in a 1968 episode of Here's Lucy. Okay, so filming began on Monday, August 14th, 1967. Carmel said, "It was such a joy returning. Who would have thought that you would have thought I was a regular member of the cast and we had done a dozen episodes together. They couldn't have been more welcoming and friendly." Okay, let me go back to that shot of the Alices. There we go. So Mark Daniels said, "The biggest problem had to do with all of the twins we had to present. It required a lot of trick photography, and it was necessary for us to be absolutely precise, or else the story wouldn't have worked. The process was more difficult than one might suspect, looking back from the vantage point of today, a time filled with computer-generated animation and post-production effects. In 1967, in an effort to avoid expensive matte shots, the split screen effect was created in camera by covering a portion of the lens and running the same section of film through a second time, or in one case, a third time, which is this shot right here. Regarding the process, Carmel said, "It was real hit and miss. They'd have the twins stand on one side of me and do the shot, then cover one side of the lens with some black material so that only half of the film running through the camera was exposed. They'd have the girls then move to the other side of me, then move the black cloth to cover the opposite side of the lens, and run the same film through the camera again. Now the full strip of film had been exposed, and the two girls became four, but they wouldn't know until the next day if it had really worked. The director and fellow in charge of the camera would watch the dailies, then let us know if we had to do a portion of a scene again. As I recall, they got it right almost every time." This was the first day to feature the pair of twins whom casting director Joe DaGosta had spotted on Hollywood Boulevard. Walter Koenig related the story. "There was much snickering among the members of the crew on the second day of the shoot, and I find myself eavesdropping. Now, the fashion of the day was miniskirts, and Joe's discoveries, these two twins, apparently were doing more than their part in wearing revealing attire. Apparently, at one point, the best boy, two grips, and a gaffer from the set were in the NBC commissary eating when these two twins came in. And at one point, these ladies walked up to the salad bar and kind of bent over to get a closer look. And when they bent over, of course, the skirt went up, and then these guys all realized that these twins weren't wearing any underwear. They weren't wearing any panties. Now, on day 3, work continued in the throne room. The wardrobe department made sure the twins, who were a bit on the experienced side, were now wearing underwear, and Jerry Finnerman was having a wonderful time painting the walls with his lighting gels and his favorite hues, various shades of purple, including magenta. Carmel said, "Remarkable what Finnerman could do with a white wall. I played a villain on Batman. He was Colonel Gum in one episode, and so had worked with some wild-looking sets, but that fellow knew his way around a box of colored gels." Walter Koenig wrote, "I did several shows with Mark Daniels before I ever saw him smile. That precedent-setting occasion was during a scene I was doing for the episode of I, Mud, in which Chekhov sits on a throne between two voluptuous androids." Let me see. Which... I think... Is that no? So this is, where is that shot? Come on. Well, okay, where is it? Ah, there we go. So Chekhov sits on the throne and says, "This place is even better than Leningrad. Up until then, I assumed that in his eyes, everything I'd done had sucked." Okay, he also said, Koenig said, "I wasn't worried about whether it was too comical or not. I just assumed that there would be an occasional episode like this. I remember it was fun to do, but I don't remember being shocked or surprised. I didn't worry that it was taking the show in a different direction as others might have. I guess I was just too close to it. I couldn't see the forest through the trees." Roger C. Carmel said, "It was a lot of fun. Bill Shatner, that very dignified captain, is really at heart a crazy kind of comic. On Star Trek, he had to be the responsible leader, so he didn't have much of a chance to let out on screen that comic devil inside him. He sure did let it out on that set, though. We had a hell of a good time." Okay. Mud had a hell of a gimmick, prompting TV Guide to run a 2-page color spread 2 weeks before the episode first aired on NBC. The title of the article was 4x4 Twins equals 2,000 androids. Stephen H. Schuer reviewed the episode for his syndicated column. Mudd, an amusing science fiction fantasy, takes over Star Trek tonight. A human outlaw, Harry Mudd, well known as a thief and no-gooder by Captain Kirk, finds himself in a unique position of being king on a planet of androids. Since the androids are programmed only to serve a human master, Mudd gives them orders to bring Kirk and his Enterprise crew to the planet where they will stay forever. Okay. So ratings-wise, did it say? And this one, it looks like they don't have any financial information. Usually they talk about how much the episode cost. I don't see that here. Okay, so the episode aired November 3rd, 1967. And the episode did a little better than usual, so I guess that article at TV Guide helped, because I think usually Star Trek was coming in around 22, 23% in the audience share. And for this one, it was 25. So up just a little, like a tick, just up like 1 percentage point maybe. And then a second Nielsen survey, this one concentrating on 12 key metropolitan areas, also had Star Trek in second, well above the third place entry on ABC. In this case, because usually Star Trek would lag about 20 percentage points behind Gomer Pyle, or 25 sometimes actually behind Gomer Pyle, but in this case it was just 10 points behind Gomer Pyle. Now, William Shatner was very fond of this episode, as well as others being made at this time. Regarding this series and this period in the series production, he commented, "The characters seemed really alive, and our stories were sharp, exciting, intelligent, and frequently quite funny." Star Trek intended to do more Mudd episodes. Stephen Kindle said, "I did a number of Harry Mudd stories that never got made. The first was called Deep Mud and picked up where Mudd left off. The robots had collected the remnants of a lost, highly advanced culture, and Mudd found a suit which was, in effect, armor which adapted to its flesh and blood inhabitant and gave him extraordinary powers. What Mudd did was use the suit to escape, and when the suit began modifying Mudd into a kind of space pirate. And the question was whether Mudd, the lighthearted con man, would soon become real mean, or would he be able to escape from the suit that gave him these abilities, but was taking his soul as a payment. He had to basically con his way out of the suit, which was run by a computer, and was basically a sentient thing in his own right. That sounds really interesting. It kind of reminds me of, You know, where there was the Babylon 5 episode. I believe it was in the first season. What was that one called? I forget, where a guy finds this alien relic and it basically takes control of him and turns him kind of into like a biological weapon. They told me during the third season that they were going to write another one for me in the fourth season, said Carmel, but of course there never was a fourth season. Carmel would act with William Shatner again in an early 1970s episode of Ironside. And he did play Harry Mudd once more, although in voice only in the episode Mudd's Passion. Infection. Okay, yeah, that's it. Infection. And what's the actor? I forget the guy's name, but he's mainly a stuntman. He was in Roadhouse. I remember that. He was in Roadhouse. I forget the guy. He was mainly a stuntman more than an actor. Let's see. Carmel said, when I did the shows, I never thought it would evolve into this. I don't think any of us thought of it in terms of the immortality it seems to have achieved. Of Roger Carmel, Leonard Nimoy said, Roger Carmel, he's such a marvelous actor and he had a tremendous impact on the audience. Walter Koenig said, quote, I really liked the man. He was terrific. He had that wonderful ability to be totally free in the work. He didn't care if it was silly or whatever it might have been. He was just free to do whatever he was asked of him and had a good time doing it. He was just a delight and everybody liked him. Yeah, he really does seem to be having a lot of fun with this character. I do think that, sometimes with supporting actors, because particularly with leading men, they have to play within certain. Marshall Teague, that's it. Yeah, Marshall Teague. That's the guy's name. Thank you, Gwagnar. And he was in some other stuff, but I don't recall it all now. He was around quite a bit at the time. But, with leading actors, they often have to, they have to be very stoic and serious, and they often have to play within, certain sort of guide rails as far as how they play a character. Like if, particularly if they're playing a lead character, or a heroic character who is very well known. If you're playing Superman or Batman or Kirk, now, of course, not back then necessarily, but now certainly, or say, I don't know, Indiana Jones or Bond or whoever, you really have certain boundaries you need to play within, or at least you should. It used to be that way. I think in recent years they've begun to change that. I don't know, maybe not necessarily for the better, but with supporting actors, often playing villains or playing comedic characters, they just have a lot more freedom to cut loose and just have fun and just kind of have fun with the role. And Roger C. Carmel is clearly doing that. Where's let me find that shot at the end that's got all the twins together. It's like right at the end here, I think. Yeah, here we go. So I think these are the two the two culprits that were mentioned earlier. I believe they were the ones going sans underwear. The Barbaras, that was it. Okay. Okay, so Carmel said, quote, I got a lot of recognition from the Star Trek shows that I did. People stop me on the street and they want to say hello to old Harry. And how can you say anything bad about somebody who just wants to walk up and tell you how much they love you? They're very nice and very polite and enormously varied. They're all different types, from school kids to older people, rock and rollers to more conservative types. It's amazing. In another interview with this author, he said, quote, people in the industry knew me as Roger C. Carmel. My friends call me Roger, but everyone else calls me Harry Mudd. I'll be in a restaurant or walking down the street and I'll see the look on their face and then the smile will come and they'll walk up and they'll put their hand out and say, Harry Mudd. Not, aren't you Harry Mudd or did you play Harry Mudd? But they just say it as if I'm like this old friend that they've known for years but haven't seen in a long time. Perhaps I should just change my name to Harcourt Fit and Mud. It is a great name, isn't it? Okay, that's going to do it for this episode. Now, as I mentioned before, the next episode will be Trouble with Tribbles. Now, I am going to be with my National Guard unit this weekend. Now, I'm going to try and get everything ready so I can do the stream next Tuesday, but I may not be able to and may have to skip a week. We'll see. I will not be streaming this Sunday, though, that's for sure. And I don't know, I guess that is going to be it for now. Please do like the stream before you go again, and please do sub to the channel if you haven't already. And I guess that'll be it. Again, thanks to everyone for watching, everyone who tuned in, and will catch it on the rewatch. Oh, hello. This is W. Daystrom. Want to say thanks for doing these. I appreciate the research. I recall some details, but hearing you talk about is like visiting with an old friend. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad you're enjoying them. Now, actually, as long as you brought it up, so I guess I will say this before I go. So, like I say, I'll have National Guard this weekend. Now, then I'll be back for about 2 or 3 weeks. Then I'm going to be with my unit again for about a week and a half. And so I'll miss at least one stream, probably in mid-August, maybe 2. We'll see. Before I get past that. But then after that, about a month after that, I'm going to be, because if you don't know, and I haven't mentioned it lately, I'm in graduate school. And I'm studying to be a nurse practitioner. And so starting in mid-August, I should be starting my clinical rotations. And that's going to demand a lot of time. Now, I'm going to try and finish out the second season of the series. But after I get that done, I'm probably going to have to take a break on this for a while. And when I say a while, it'll depend, but it may be up to a year. We'll see. And then maybe after that, I'll get back to it. We'll have to see how things kind of work out. Maybe I'll be able to work them in, but if I do, it'll definitely be less often, like maybe every couple of weeks or maybe once or twice a month at the most. We'll see. But again, thank you for those words, W. Daystrom. I do appreciate it. Okay, so that'll be it. Have a good evening, everyone, and I will see you. Oh, and okay, one more. And Daystrom says everyone needs a break. Yeah. Yeah, I do hope to get to the 3rd season eventually, definitely, and probably do the animated series after that. And I don't know, after that, I don't know. I may do the movies. I'm not sure. And maybe Star Trek continues. We'll see. I would like to maybe do those. But anyway, that's going to be way down the line. Everyone have a good evening, and hopefully see you next week.